The War of the Worlds.
Hello? Hello? Is anybody there? I said I'd come back, didn't I? After I had a little bit of my homemade bread and a bit of tomato soup. Well, I've come back now, ready to look at chapter 6 with you. The work of 15 days. Only a very short chapter, this one, isn't it? Well, do you know why that is? Well, it's because we're getting to the end of the book. And you see what H.G. Wells is doing is making that, he's increasing the pace of the narrative, he's making it very, very exciting. Remember that heartbeat, the idea that the shorter the sentences, the shorter the chapters, everything gets a little bit more fast. It's like moving those beats per minute nearer together, so you got this faster and faster. I thought that was my old ticker then, going faster and faster. I thought I was going to have to ring the emergency services at that rate. Oh dear me. Well, here we go then. Chapter 6, this one's called Let's Get Started.
6. The Work of 15 Days. For some time, I stood tottering on the mound regardless of my safety. Within that noisome den from which I had emerged, I had thought with a narrow intensity only of our immediate security. I had not realized what had been happening to the world, had not anticipated this startling vision of unfamiliar things. I had expected to see Sheen in ruins. I found about me the landscape, weird and lurid, of another planet.
Now, you've got a bit of scientific logic and reasoning going on here because, of course, the landscape would look Martian because the red weed has made it look so. So when we look up at the starry, starry night, oh, a lovely song by, what's he called? Oh, Don McLean. I love that song called Vincent, all about Vincent van Gogh. Anyway, that's beside the point. When we look up at the night sky and we see the red planet, he's giving us a reason why it's red. Well, it's red because of this red creeper, this red weed that takes over the whole landscape. So he's making it seem like the red creeper has taken over Earth, eh? Not on my watch, darling, not on your Nelly, eh? But it's taken over the whole of Earth, and he feels very disorientated, as indeed he would, and as you or I would too.
For that moment, I touched an emotion beyond the common range of men, yet one that the poor brutes we dominate know only too well. I felt as a rabbit might feel, returning to his burrow and suddenly confronted by the work of a dozen busy navvies digging the foundations of a house.
You see, what H.G. Wells is doing there is he's using a simile, isn't he? Comparing the narrator to a rabbit. He's reducing humanity down to the little animals, you know, to make them sort of wonder what it must be like if you're a little rabbit coming home to find the great big machines, excavating machines have dug up your house. Makes me think of that lovely little story. Do you remember reading that Roald Dahl one? It was fantastic, Mr. Fox. It reminds me of that, you know, all the machines are digging up. Oh, it's a nightmare.
I felt the first inkling of a thing that presently grew quite clear in my mind, that oppressed me for many days. A sense of dethronement, a persuasion that I was no longer a master, but an animal among animals, under the Martian heel. With us, it would be as with them, to lurk and watch, to run and hide. The fear and empire of man had passed away.
Oh my word, there's a lot to say about that little section there. Well, first of all, let's look at the language. He's using zoomorphism to sort of describe humanity as being nothing more than just little animals like the rabbits and the little badgers and the little mice. So the zoomorphism there, and that's spelled ZOOMORPHISM. zoomorph, ism, and that's ISM at the end there, morphism, zoomorphism, zoo like the animals, you know, that like when you go to the zoo, you know, if you've been to Regent Park Zoo, you know, London Zoo, oh, it's fantastic, oh, it's an absolute dream. Anyway, that's one technique he's doing. He's reducing humanity down to the state of an animal. Makes us feel nervous, makes the contemporary reader, the Victorians, feel very uneasy, because of course at that point they were at the height of British Empire, and yet here's a man saying that they're nothing more than just little animals having to run and hide. You see, now that's a contextual point. And in fact, while I'm on that point, let's just have a quick look to the last bit. The fear and empire of man had passed away. So that reference to the word empire is not a coincidence, darlings. It's absolutely there for our purposes. This is referring to the empire of man. This is referring to the British Empire. The fact that the British Empire spanned the globe. And yet here he is suggesting that humanity, within a space of a few days, 15 days to be precise, could be reduced to nothing more than little scurrying animals. So that's something else for you to write down. Now there's another thing here as well, a little technique. Let's have a little look here. Let me just find it. Oh yeah. So this is just the line above. It says, with us it would be as with them, to lurk and watch, to run and hide. Well, you've got hendiadys there, really, haven't you? So you've got lurk and watch and run and hide. They're both the same thing. Run and hide, same thing. Lurking and watching, same thing, really. So hendiadys. Or if you're not sure, you might say, oh, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat there. Hang on a second. Just give Nanny a second. Hang on. There we are. That's better. Must be a little bit of that basil, my tomato and basil soup. I don't know. Anyway, where will you get to? Oh yeah, the hendiadys. So lurk and watch, same thing. Run and hide, same thing, same effect. And I mean, if you wanted to go the extra mile, you could say that they're even linked with an asyndetic list. So it's an asyndetic list of hendiadys, which uses zoomorphism to represent humanity and represents the fall of empire. I mean, that is a killer combo point to make, isn't it? If you were to make that in the exam, oh my word, the examiner would knock their socks off. They would fall off their chair when they read that, wouldn't they? Oh, it's an absolute beauty.
But so soon as this strangeness had been realized, it passed, and my dominant motive became the hunger of my long and dismal fast. In the direction away from the pit, I saw, beyond a red-covered wall, a patch of garden ground unburied. This gave me a hint, and I went knee-deep and sometimes neck-deep in the red weed. The density of the weed gave me a reassuring sense of hiding. The wall was some 6 feet high, and when I attempted to clamber it, I found I could not lift my feet to the crest. So I went along by the side of it and came to a corner and a rockwork that enabled me to get to the top and tumble into the garden I coveted. Here I found some young onions, a couple of gladiolus bulbs, and a quantity of immature carrots, all of which I secured, and, scrambling over a ruined wall, went on my way through scarlet and crimson trees towards Kew. It was like walking through an avenue of gigantic blood drops, possessed with two ideas: to get more food and to limp, as soon and as far as my strength permitted, out of this accursed, unearthly region of the pit.
Oh yes, the old gladiolus. I used to grow gladiolus in the garden, before all this happened, before the event, Well, there he is. He's gathering these bits of food and onions and carrots and all the things from the kitchen garden. Anyway, and then Kew. Oh, Kew Gardens, they're beautiful. Have you been to Kew Gardens in Richmond? Oh my word, if you've never been, you've got to get yourself there. It's an absolute wonder. In fact, as you're reading this last part of the book, I really recommend that you have a map, ideally a paper map, open on the desk in front of you. You can chart with your finger. You can look at the way in which he travels, particularly in the last few chapters as he gets to Primrose Hill, and you can really pinpoint where he is down to the very street that he's on. It's a very useful way to visualise the journey. So that's what I'd recommend. And you can do it. I mean, I'm sure you've got Google Maps, you've got Apple Maps, and you've got all sorts of things you can use. So I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, the point I want to make here is the language point of gigantic blood drops. Now, this is that red colour again, the crimson red. So you've got that symbolism of danger, symbolism of blood, because remember the red weed has sort of consumed the native plants and it represents the Martian invasion itself.
Some way further, in a grassy place, was a group of mushrooms which I also devoured. And then I came upon a broad sheet of flowing shallow water, where meadows used to be. These fragments of nourishment served only to whet my hunger. At first I was surprised at this flood in a hot, dry summer. But afterwards I discovered that it was caused by the tropical exuberance of the red weed. Directly this extraordinary growth encountered water, it straightway became gigantic and of unparalleled fecundity. Its seeds were simply poured down into the water of the Wey and Thames, and its swiftly growing and titanic water fronds speedily choked both those rivers.
So what have we got here? We've got some more symbolism, haven't we? The red weed is actually affecting the natural world. It's affecting the River Thames and the River Wey. It's affecting it and making it burst its banks because it's literally damming the river. So it's overwhelming the terrestrial features of London. So that's to be aware of. That's symbolism there. A little bit of symbolism for you. You're welcome.
At Putney, as I afterwards saw, the bridge was almost lost in a tangle of this weed. And at Richmond, too, the Thames waters poured in a broad and shallow stream across the meadows of Hampton and Twickenham. As the waters spread, the weed followed them, until the ruined villas of the Thames Valley were for a time lost in this red swamp, whose margin I explored, and much of the desolation the Martians had caused was concealed.
So, as I said before, darling, it's worth having a little map next to you to read along with and trace the journey. Putney's just south of the river, and then you've got Richmond and Hampton and Twickenham. These are all getting closer to London town, all getting closer. There's a sense of incrementum. It's getting more and more towards the capital itself, and that's where the book reaches its heady climax in a few chapters' time. So there we are. The red swamp is a metaphor, of course, because wherever there's water, it has a fierce fecundity, a fierce ability to grow very, very quickly indeed. And it represents and symbolises the Martians themselves, who, of course, have been very fast and very efficient in their colonisation of this part of England.
In the end, the red weed succumbed almost as quickly as it had spread. A cankering disease due, it is believed, to the action of certain bacteria presently seized upon it.
And there we have it. This is foreshadowing. This is a structural technique. It's also called prolepsis, Prolepsis, and it's foreshadowing the bacterial demise of the Martians themselves. Here, this disease has overcome the red weed, which terrestrial plants are immune to, but which the red weed is not, and that foreshadows exactly what happens to the Martians when terrestrial bacteria, which humanity is immune to, overwhelms the Martians and kills them dead.
Now, by action of natural selection, all terrestrial plants have acquired a resisting power against bacterial diseases. They never succumb without a severe struggle, but the red weed rotted like a thing already dead.
So what H.G. Wells is doing here, the cheeky monkey, is he's referring to a scientific process, a Darwinian process called natural selection. And you'll have learned about that in biology, I imagine. And the idea is that only the strongest survive. The ones that can survive the terrestrial bacteria get to reproduce, and the ones who don't. So by natural selection, all plants on Earth are immune or robust enough to live in spite of the bacteria, whereas of course the red weed is unfamiliar to the bacteria and therefore is affected by it. Very much like the COVID-19, you know, very much like the coronavirus. But I'll say no more about that. We won't say the C word, hey?
The fronds became bleached and then shriveled and brittle. They broke off at the least touch, and the waters that had stimulated their early growth carried their last vestiges out to sea.
I just make this quick point because, I mean, it's not impossible that this section might come up in the exam. This is an important point, particularly given that it foreshadows. There's plenty of technique to talk about. Look here, if you will. Just turn your attention, if you will, to the short sentences. Oh, there's a helicopter flying over my house. Oh, I haven't seen one of those for weeks on end. Oh, what a lovely thing. Oh, it's a red and white one. Very nice. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah, the sentence structure. Sentence structure, very short sentences, and it sort of represents the abruptness with which the red weed dies, I suppose. So look out for short sentences. If you can apply it to something happening in the text, then do. And in this case, short sentences, short lifespan of the red weed, and that's a structural technique.
My first act on coming to this water was, of course, to slake my thirst. I drank a great deal of it, and, moved by an impulse, gnawed some fronds of red weed. But they were watery, and had a sickly, metallic taste.
Look at that. He's even eating it. He's trying to eat the red weed. Oh, my word. This is a new low, isn't it, for humanity? Eating the red weed. Oh, my goodness me. Like during the war, we all used to eat bumblebees, you know. Oh, no, I don't think that's true. I think I made that up. I think someone told me that, and I think I believed it. Anyway, it's he's eating the red weed, but the red weed tastes nasty. So this is another point at which you might say it says nadir, 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 a real low point, because he's even having to eat the red weed, which has so consumed the earth. I think it all fits into the idea of foreshadowing, really. He's consuming the red weed, or trying to, just in the way that he eventually, and humanity, overcomes the old Martians. Yeah, you're welcome.
I found the water was sufficiently shallow for me to wade securely, although the red weed impeded my feet a little. But the flood evidently got deeper towards the river, and I turned back to Mortlake. I managed to make out the road by means of occasional ruins of its villas and fences and lamps, and so presently I got out of this spate and made my way to the hill going up towards Roehampton, and came out on Putney Common.
Look at all the proper nouns, you see. All these place names. I really do hope you're looking at a map while you read through this and just charting his journey, because it really is fascinating. Even if you're not familiar with that part of England, it's very fascinating to see the journey he's making on foot, and you can just see how he's creeping closer and closer towards London. So you want to be talking about incrementum. So language, you've got the proper nouns. Structure, you've got the incrementum, getting closer and closer to London itself.
Here the scenery changed from the strange and unfamiliar to the wreckage of the familiar. Patches of ground exhibited the devastation of a cyclone, and in a few score yards I would come upon perfectly undisturbed spaces. Houses with their blinds trimly drawn and doors closed, as if they had been left for a day by the owners, or as if their inhabitants slept within. The red weed was less abundant. The tall trees along the lane were free from the red creeper. I hunted for food among the trees, finding nothing, and I also raided a couple of silent houses, but they had already been broken into and ransacked. I rested for the remainder of the daylight in a shrubbery, being, in my enfeebled condition, too fatigued to push on.
Always be looking out for the sentence structure here, and you can see here that the sentence structure is quite complex. So you've got things like I rested for the remainder of the daylight in a shrubbery, being, in my enfeebled condition, too fatigued to push on. So you've got these embedded subordinate clauses. Now, what this does is it drags out the sentence, it makes it much longer. Well, why does it do that, you may ask? Well, let me see if I can offer you a suggestion. I think because he himself feels, as he says, fatigued, too fatigued to push on. Well, the sentences themselves drag on, just like the whole book drags on. Oh no, I quite like reading the book actually. It's quite a nice book, isn't it? And it's quite a short book. But anyway, not like Stasiland I'm doing for year 12. Oh my word, that's doing my nutting. Reading Stasiland, good grief. And I don't even get to do the silly voices for them. Anyway, so long sentences represent the tiredness and the sort of fatigue that he has as the narrator, whereas in contrast you've got the short sentences sometimes, and that gives a sense of energy and excitement. So here you've got long sentences, fatigue. Does that make sense? That's a long-winded way of saying it, but here we go. That's a structural point because it's sentences. So long sentences equal long-winded, just like old Nanny's teaching methods. A bit long-winded, but we get there in the end, don't we?
All this time, I saw no human beings, and no sign of the Martians. I encountered a couple of hungry-looking dogs, but both hurried circuitously away from the advances I made them. Near Roehampton, I had seen 2 human skeletons, not bodies, but skeletons, picked clean. And in the wood by me, I found the crushed and scattered bones of several cats and rabbits and the skull of a sheep. But though I gnawed parts of these in my mouth, there was nothing to be got from them. After sunset, I struggled along the road towards Putney, where, I think, the heatray must have been used for some reason. And in a garden beyond Roehampton, I got a quantity of immature potatoes, sufficient to stay my hunger. From this garden, one looked down upon Putney and the river. The aspect of the place in the dusk was singularly desolate. Blackened trees, blackened, desolate ruins, and down the hill, the sheets of flooded river, red tinged with the weed. And all over, silence.
Well, we've seen it before, and I'm sure we'll see it again, but we've got the asyndetic list, haven't we, there? The blackened trees, and then the word blackened repeated for us as well. It's another structural point there. Blackened, desolate ruins, and down the hill, the sheets of the flooded river, red tinged with the weed. So there's asyndetic list as he looks out across the river and across Putney, just south of the river, so very close to London itself. I mean, you'd say really Putney's part of London, and southwest London, and so therefore it's just desolate all over. It's blackened, it's burned, it's really in a poor state. So the asyndetic list there, structural feature, just to emphasise how much destruction of our beloved capital city has taken place.
It filled me with indescribable terror to think how swiftly that desolating change had come. For a time, I believed that mankind had been swept out of existence, and that I stood there alone, the last man alive. Hard by the top of Putney Hill, I came upon another skeleton, with the arms dislocated and removed several yards from the rest of the body. As I proceeded, I became more and more convinced that the extermination of mankind was, save for such stragglers as myself, already accomplished in this part of the world. The Martians, I thought, had gone on and left the country desolated, seeking food elsewhere. Perhaps even now they were destroying Berlin or Paris. Or it might be they had gone northward.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, what a sad state of affairs, eh? Well, he's mentioning other capital cities, Berlin and Paris. There are other proper nouns, but not just any old proper nouns. No, these are capital cities, aren't they? So it's very important that you understand that these are places like London, that these are significant places, and it gives a real sense of global scale to the threat of the Martians. Now, how many apocalyptic films and stories and comics and TV shows? I mean, this has launched so many. It's launched a whole genre, really, of zombie apocalypse style. Sorry, I'm not bored. I'm just a little bit tired. That's why I'm yawning my head off. Must be time for my afternoon nap, I think. Anyway, this is really is the sort of the very idea of an apocalyptic scene. He thinks he's the last man alive on Earth, and he looks around him, sees devastation. He sees skeletons of people killed, but also all the meat picked off their bones by animals, or maybe even other survivors. Who knows? So it's very frightening, and it's also, as I say, very, very pioneering, really, because lots of other writers have used this style, and film writers and TV writers and novel writers and comic writers have used these to create a very similar sort of what we call trope, which just means a sort of thing you find in certain genres or certain categories, and that is the last person alive scenario in an apocalyptic scene such as this one. It's a real low point. I think I'd still refer to this as a nadir, Nadir, nadir point for the narrator. Very low point indeed at this end of this chapter 6, and it's probably it for chapter 6. Now, bear in mind, these chapters are what you'd call towards the end of the book, aren't they? Clearly, I mean, we're almost there now, thank goodness. And if you're answering this question on the exam, and it's towards the end of the book, you want to say in your answer, structurally, this extract is taken from towards the end of the novel, and therefore you might expect certain climactic events to be happening, and this certainly seems very, very bleak for humanity at this point. But we know, don't we, that the red weed is foreshadowed. We've got the benefit of hindsight. We've already read it once, or at least once, and we know the red weed foreshadows the end for the Martians too. So we're going to join again, and I might do the next few chapters as well, actually, because I'm on a bit of a roll. I might just go have a little nap, little 40 winks, and I'll come back for chapter 7, The Man on Putney Hill. Do you know, I met a man on Putney Hill once. He was a lovely old man.